Minutes Past Midnight. This is an anthology horror movie, and like with most horror anthology movies, it comprises of kind of like, I think it's 6 or 7 short films. There's no wraparound story. It's literally just one kind of film after another, so there's no running thread or kind of common bookend story here. And like most horror anthologies, they are of varying quality. Although we also, other this one, I didn't think there was any out-and-out terrible films on here. They were of varying quality, but there was no real bad ones. They went from kind of mediocre to damn fine, which we'll talk about in a minute. The main issue, personally, I have with anthology films is that I feel you never really get to know the characters all that well, so you're never as invested as you are in a full-length feature. Although there's one film here that does do a pretty good job of it, I will say, and that's the one I'm going to talk about primarily, Ghost Train. Now, this is the only film on this anthology that I would say that will elicit any type of scares. Most of the other films are actually kind of played for laughs. They're kind of horror comedies. This one is definitely not. This one is played for proper scares. And it's reminiscent of Stephen King's It, I would say. Though there's no clown here, it's nothing to do with a clown. But it is to do with a fairground. It takes place over 2 time zones, and we have these kind of group of kids going to visit this dilapidated old kind of like fairground, of which there is this ghost train. And something happens there, and they cut to years later, and we have actually 2 brothers returning to the site to obviously pay tribute to something that happened there, without going into any kind of spoilers. Suffice to say, it is superbly acted and very, very well directed, and I was gutted when we didn't get more from this. So this one really could be a feature, I feel, and had it expanded a little bit more, and I was kind of gutted when it ended, what it did, but it's very, very well done. Really kind of professionally made, this one. Genuinely kind of spooky, and you will be wanting to know more. The only issue I had of it, there's a kind of a reaction shot which I felt should have been a little bit more of a bigger reaction when something happens. That's the only critique I really have of that particular short. That by far and away is the strongest one. The weakest one is, in my opinion at least, is one called Roid Rage, which is a kind of throwback to kind of the 80s. And it's basically about a killer asshole, literally about a killer asshole. But I don't think it works. They kind of maybe try to spoof the kind of the time zone a little bit too much. And they have this, I'm not sure if it's meant to be knowingly shitty acting, but it just comes across as shitty acting, unfortunately. So that one really wasn't very good, I've got to say. And the concept as well was a little bit drawn out, even for a short. The other one I would say worth of note is a puppet film, and it's basically, I'm swearing it's using these Hot Toy figures. It's very well done, and I've got to say the actual sets and the stuff that they've made for this little story are pretty good. And this one, I would say, has the most complete arc in it, if that makes sense. I didn't think the actual story was all that compelling, if I'm completely honest. It did seem somewhat kind of like of a generic kind of ghosts type story. But it was very, interesting to look at. Now, I personally am not a huge fan of animation, so it kind of takes me out of it a little bit when I'm watching things like that, because I can never really get invested all that much. Some people, I will say, may kind of like that kind of thing, and I appreciated the arts, but for me personally, although I kind of quite liked it, it's definitely worth talking about. Very kind of Tim Burton-esque, if you like. I don't know. I just am pulled out of it because I'm just personally not a big fan of kind of animation. I just can't get it to buy into the characters when it's stuff like that. There's a couple of other interesting. There's quite a good comedy one, horror comedy with Arthur Darvill, who you may know from I think Doctor Who and Legend of Tomorrow, playing like a serial killer. There's a few serial killer ones here. That was quite good. That's definitely play for laughs, though. The very first one is a kind of Texas Chainsaw Massacre type one. There's an Australian one, which I also thought was pretty strong here. And I think it's a Spanish one or a Mexican. And that one is that's more like a typical kind of anthology film. And the very last one is a kind of Evil Dead style crossed with brain dead version of the Chupacabra, I would say. The Australian one was also quite good, I've got to say. Overall, I have to say this is probably a better than average anthology film. The absolute standout by a country mile is Ghost Train. I did think the puppeteering one was quite good, but I think that will definitely have its fans as well. a couple of kind of weaker ones for me. I didn't think the last one was particularly strong. I didn't think the Roid Rage one was particularly strong. But overall, a pretty good package. Definitely worth seeing alone for Ghost Train. I would absolutely say that. If I were reviewing Ghost Train on its own, I'd probably be giving that a 9 out of 10. But as a package, as an anthology film, I would have to give this probably a 7 out of 10. Because I don't think some of the other ones are nearly as strong. But yeah, I quite enjoyed it overall. Kept me invested for the most part. And if you're a horror fan, definitely check it out, because it gets straight to it. It doesn't waste time, this one. It gets absolutely straight to the bloody point, and I think you'll enjoy it. Which was your favourite section out of this movie, if you've seen it? Anyone like Roid Rage? Is Roid Rage anyone's favourite who weren't involved in the production? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time.